Good morning, good afternoon, and of course, good evening. My name is Tommo, and welcome to not a pre or post race Chinwag. No, we are still in the summer break, which means we've got more news to talk about. Well, let's be honest, not a huge amount of news to talk about. This has been the quietest week so far. Last week was chaos with Wheatley and science and all stuff going on. There's been a little bit more chilled out this week, but we're still getting reports. We're still getting little bits of informative nuggets being fed out to the world. So we're going to talk about it. There's a couple of stories I want to cover, but maybe this is going to be a bit more of a conversational live podcast on the Tommo YouTube channel, of course, and audio only, Spotify, Apple Podcasts. Obviously, you won't be listening to this live, but just for your lugs, right? If you don't want to look at me, if you just want to listen, bosh, happy days. Hello, Pranav, Milan, Ethan, Simon, Tom, Albert, Liam, Thoppy, Tatsumi, Matt, Yoris, Northstar, Mario, Jack, Nelly, Desktop, Phillips, Yard Animal, Dimmy, Shiv, Corridor, Abhinav. Thank you all for joining me, wherever you are in the world. It's a pleasure. As always, should we get into it? Straight into the meat and bones of this one, which is the reported courting of Adrian Newey by Aston Martin. Now, of course, the talk around Adrian has been significant for a long time. Okay, he's seen as a bit of a cheat code in not just modern F1. He's the most successful designer in the history of the sport. No question about that. So, obviously, Ferrari's been linked. Everyone's been linked with Adrian, and understandably so, having such an asset leave Red Bull Racing, who's achieved so much and always really held up his end of the bargain, even when, Red Bull were having their big barren period between Seb's domination and Max's domination, when Lewis was cleaning up. Broadly speaking, on the chassis front, I think they delivered. It was the Renault engine that really, really did hold them back. Just imagine if they'd have had an equivalent power unit to the Mercedes in that Red Bull. This sport may have been continually dominated since Seb started didn't dominate in 2010, but certainly, 2011 onwards. Almost called it 2011, which is technically probably the correct thing to call it, but that just sounds wrong. Either way, Newey's obviously come back on the market now. To what extent that is to do with the Christian Horner controversy, the leaks, the allegations against him, which that was a bit of news as well. Actually, the appeal has been dismissed. Honestly, we don't know the details, so I'm not gonna sit on here and speak about that situation with any degree of fact-based insight. So either way, that's all happened, that's all gone on, and it's caused a lot of instability, as Jos Verstappen said, and we talked about that last week, that he expects the Horner's continued tenure in this role, and perhaps that played a part in Adrian deciding to leave. Perhaps it didn't. All we do know is that he's not going to be at Red Bull Racing. Is he already out, actually? Is he already gone? I don't actually know. I know he's obviously stepping things back, and he's talking about chilling, going south of France with the missus and enjoying life away from the F1 circus for the first time in a very long time. I'm sure maybe he's had a break at some point. Obviously, he went between McLaren and Red Bull, didn't he? And then obviously was Leighton House where it all kind of started, and Benetton, and so he's been around a bit, Adrian, at least in the early part of his career, but. It'll be a good change for him, whatever he does decide to do next, and Aston seem to be the most likely destination based off of, does anyone remember the name Robert Doornbos? Back in the day, Robert works for Ziggo Sport in the Netherlands, and obviously former F1 driver, F1 analyst. He's an equivalent to on the Sky broadcast, someone. Obviously, Jensen had more success than Robert, for sure. But then Robert probably had more, would he had more success kind of than Karun, I guess? Kind of maybe similar to a Karun in terms of level that they achieved in Formula One anyway, and then has moved into an analyst role. Jolyon Palmer, I would say Jolyon. To be fair, I don't really remember Roberts' career. Didn't he lead a race at one point? Was it Run Hungry or something when he pitted? Was that Dawn Boss? Either way, anyway, I digress. You can look that up yourselves. So Robert's been dropping some interesting information on LinkedIn. Again, he's a very informed member of the paddock. There's a picture of him with old Lando Norris, and there's a picture of him back in his old Red Bull days as well. And there's a picture of him with Jos Verstappen. But yeah, the interesting part of the quote here is, well, I will briefly go over what he said. So obviously he's talking about the Adrian Newey Ferrari stuff, and then news broke that Adrian would be leaving Red Bull, swirling that was heading to Ferrari, with Lewis Hamilton obviously making the switch, and Newey's talked about how he'd love to work with Lewis and Fernando in particular. And well, that's where the Aston Martin thing becomes perhaps a little bit more interesting. Speculation linking Newey to Ferrari is fair. Look, at the end of the day, I think a big barrier to that was always going to be the geographic barrier, and I think that's a barrier between lots of people moving jobs and changing their situation. What does Newey want next? Does he want to move his life to Maranello? Because to make that work, it's not like he can just work from home and achieve the Newey is unbelievable, don't get me wrong, but there are so many incredibly talented, incredibly well achieved people in this sport, that just sticking Newey in anywhere that you can just work from home for Ferrari, for example, isn't necessarily going to work. So obviously there's talk in this post about Newey's demands being higher for salary, and that apparently, according to Robert, proved too much for Fred Vasseur, and negotiations ultimately fell through. And then obviously Aston Martin pops up here, and the interesting quote is here: Newey was Aston Martin's top priority, and the deal is now finalised, set to earn over $100 million over 3 years, twice his Red Bull salary. Major input in technical decisions, state-of-the-art factory, completed last year, not completed fully, still needs work to be done. Likely attracted him, and you've got to imagine that with Lawrence Stroll's approach to things, it's very much kind of, he's gone all in, as Lawrence, in part, of course, to support his son and try and achieve things with Lance, but also his personal intrigue. He owns a racetrack in Canada, doesn't he, Lawrence? He's clearly not only a multi-billionaire, but a big petrol head, or gearhead, as you would call him in America, right? I think that's the thing. So, look, the way that Robert's talking about it is a done deal. Now, of course, these things are never done until they're done. And, I mean, I'm not sure how Eddie Jordan will feel seeing this. Because, of course, Eddie Jordan is Adrian Newey's kind of agent. He's helping him. And he's got his Formula for Success podcast with David Coulthard, which I would strongly recommend. Good watch. Good listen and watch. Yeah, so, you know what? I do think, to be honest, I do think it kind of makes sense. When Newey was announced that he was going to be leaving, there were two teams that, for me, seemed like the logical destinations. And those were Williams and Aston Martin. Now, of course, again, Ferrari, Newey going in, would he get the autonomy at a Ferrari, a team that is well known to interfere and to, especially upper management, right, to get in the way? You know, would Newey be happy with that, for one? Secondly, again, of course, geographic location. Newey doesn't have to prove anything to anyone. He's achieved all he can. Yes, Ferrari is the biggest name in the sport, but realistically, for a man, you know, in his stage of life, you know, he's not going to be far off retirement. Obviously, look, Lewis Hamilton throwing it all in and chucking it in and going to Ferrari is one thing, but he's almost 40. He's not well into his 60s like Adrian is. So that always felt like a bit of a long shot, just more from a personal point of view to Adrian. Like, I don't know the guy, right? But I imagine that would have been quite a barrier, okay? Versus, right now he's obviously got his home. It must be fairly close to Milton Keynes, where Red Bull's based. He's always spent his life, his working life, his Formula One life at teams based in the UK. So to upheave that, to move to Ferrari, that was always going to be quite a personal decision. And it doesn't seem that that's happened. And perhaps those, inflated numbers that he was asking for was in part to justify doing that. Do you want to get a PJ back home, like, after every day? Maybe Newey would want to, in which case you're going to have to pay me 20 million more on top of everyone else. And obviously everyone's differently motivated by money, right? Everyone's got a price, okay? Everyone's morals go out the window at some point when you throw enough money at them. Not that this is a decision of morality, of course, right? It's a job in an entertainment sport. I'm just saying, more broadly speaking, there's a certain bag that we'd all accept for whatever. So that always felt like a stretch. And look, obviously Enrico Cardile, he is moving to Aston Martin from Ferrari. So you can argue maybe there's a bit of a technical shuffle there and they could have integrated Newey somewhat. But as much as Ferrari have stalled as of late, there has been progress. Yes, it has, again, not fallen off, it's stalled somewhat. It happens. To integrate Newey within that pre-existing technical team, again, it feels like Adrian has a very specific way of wanting to work and wanting to consult, because in recent years he has been more of a consultant to Red Bull, and Pierre Wache and that technical team at Red Bull have more led up the day-to-day operations anyway of the team. So I can understand why Ferrari didn't happen. Ultimately, it would have been a very passion decision. It would have been a vibes decision. It would have been it's the place I would have liked to see him go to the most. Possibly. There's one other team I might have liked to see him go just as much, but a legacy team like Ferrari would have been cool, but it doesn't seem like it's going to happen. And then as for, McLaren, I've seen a few of you in chat mention McLaren, bring him to McLaren, which, listen, McLaren are onto a good thing at the moment. They're in a very good place. Their technical team's working very well. They've got the best They've got the best all-round car. That's what I'm trying to say right now. Right now, they do. Okay, and upgrades will come for other teams, and the pecking order is going to change, and blah, blah, blah. They could bring an upgrade to McLaren next, and it actually makes the car worse. Like, who knows, right? That's not unheard of. But right now, they have got that car to a place where it does seem more capable over a broader spectrum of tracks than the Red Bull is. So, destabilizing that system by bringing in someone like Newey, who you are going to have to give seniority to, over a system that actually works, I don't think I'd endorse that. Like, Newey on paper, quite literally with his notebook, is great, but when you've got something that's clearly working at McLaren, to bring in Newey, I don't think that was ever the right choice for McLaren. Not at all. Because I think also another point to Newey, his presence at Red Bull paid dividends massively going into ground effect, because he had more understanding of ground effect than anyone, because that's what he'd done his, thesis or whatever it was on when he was back studying in the 80s, and, those ground effect cars early on in his career. So that advantage was big at the start of 2022, wasn't it? Like, once they sorted out their technical gremlins, they did just pull away from Ferrari. However, that was then, this is now. All of these teams' technical structures have now gotten to understand, to the point where McLaren now have a better package than Red Bull. Going into 26 onwards, these cars are still going to have a significant ground effect component to reduce turbulent air. So I'm not sure that the impact of having Newey, it certainly, I believe this with confidence, that the value of Newey was bigger to a team going into 2022 than it is going to a team than it is for a team going into 2026. You know what I mean? Because everyone else has had this, 3-4 years to build their own understanding of ground effect. Newey had the historical knowledge and was able to use that to help Red Bull and set them on the right path, and the understanding around the suspension and all that. That's the way I see it. So I do think the value of Newey is still great. I don't think it's as groundbreaking as... And it certainly doesn't justify destabilizing what McLaren already have that already works. And to an extent Ferrari as well, that's where it works. And that's where obviously then you look at a team like Aston, who have very much faltered, have demonstrated some good understanding, but then not being able to progress that car really at all. And Williams, a team that are sleeping giant, right, in terms of their brand and their connection to the sport. Bringing Newey in, you could justify with those two teams, splitting up your pre-existing technical structure. Whereas whether that's Pat Fry works alongside Adrian at Williams, for example, and I believe they've worked together in the past. I could be wrong there. Obviously, I know Fry was at McLaren when he's done the rounds, and he was at Alpine before Williams, and then he was at McLaren before them. But you've not got that pre-established, successful technical team at Williams, so you could do that. And Aston Martin as well. You've got who's the fella who went to Aston from Red Bull? Dan Fallows. That's it. Dan Fallows. Dan Fallows obviously worked with Adrian. So if Adrian's going to come into Aston Martin, there will be a degree of understanding of how they work together. So he doesn't have to move home. Adrian Silverstone is close enough to Milton Keynes that Adrian can probably just stay at his gaff and just commute in. Lawrence has this kind of almost infinite pot of money that is prepared to throw at this project, but not just the F1 project, the road car projects. And we know that Adrian is interested, with his work on the RB19 or the Valkyrie with Aston Martin. There is a pre-existing brand relationship there, and he's done stuff with Aston before. And obviously, Aston are going into Le Mans, aren't they? We've seen spy shots of their car out at Silverstone. So Lawrence will give Adrian, if Adrian does go to Aston Martin, will give him opportunities to work on these kind of projects, which Adrian is clearly motivated to do. He's done stuff with boats before as well, which maybe that's not such a thing here. It just feels like as a roundabout opportunity, it kind of does tick all the boxes. They've got their wind tunnel coming online fairly soon, Aston Martin. They're not where they want to be, but Adrian can help bring them to a place where they can be successful. He can work alongside Fernando Alonso as well. Maybe even with Max Verstappen. There's been rumours as well, Max to Aston Martin. At least Lawrence is trying it, which, that's the only way he's dropping his son. If it's Max and Fernando in an Aston Martin team, wow. That would be phenomenal. But look, if they do sign Newey, that has to make the prospect of Max working with Adrian again at Aston Martin alongside Fernando Alonso. That feels like a very serious project. Whereas right now, Lawrence has invested so much money in that infrastructure. It's an amazing... I've been to the factory. It's a really cool facility. But when you've got Lance in the car, we know why, and when you've stalled so much in your development, it is hard to take Aston Martin seriously right now. But getting Newey in and getting Newey in alone would be big. And again, Newey at Aston Martin would make that team a lot more appealing to a lot of drivers. So, yeah, I think when you break it down, and again, this is all shout out Robert Dornbos. This is all coming from him. Deal is now finalised, 100 million over 3 years. Whether it does happen or not, what I would say is that I do believe that this is a very sensible next destination for Newey. I would have loved to see him go to Williams, to be honest. That would have been the one that, alongside Ferrari, I would have really liked to see, just to bring that historic name back, go back to a team where he worked at back in the day as well. I forget he worked for Williams. You say Benetton, Leighton House, Williams, McLaren, Red Bull. I'm probably missing one as well. But it feels like Aston Martin is probably actually going to be able to give him more in terms of those projects outside of F1 that clearly he's excited and into. So yeah, I'm actually gonna, now that I've kind of said my thing on Adrian, where do you think will Adrian? Oh, actually, which team makes most sense for Adrian? Right, I'm gonna do a little poll. We've got 4 options, so I'm gonna do Aston, Ferrari, Williams, or McLaren. They're the only teams that have been realistically. I mean, Mercedes. I've not even mentioned Mercedes. I'm gonna do McLaren or Mercedes as an option. I've not even mentioned Mercedes. Again, it feels like Mercedes have now finally started to understand these ground effect rules, their technical team anyway. So to bring in Adrian as a senior person who has a very, baked in way of doing things, quite an old fashioned way of doing things. That isn't necessarily going to work. That's not necessarily going to fly. Why not Alpine? Susan, do I really need to explain why not Alpine? I mean, they wish. That would be, but I don't think Alpine quite is gonna it's gonna quite. But the thing, Fallows has worked with Newey before, and Aston have hired a number of ex-Red Bull people, but like Fallows will be able to give that insight to be like, oh right, this is how Adrian works. Like we can pre-set up things so it's a more seamless integration when he actually does start there after he's taken his time off. Ryan Reynolds convincing Adrian, do you reckon? Do you reckon? Right, 50% of you think Aston makes most sense for Adrian, 20% Ferrari, 25% Williams, and about 5% of you McLaren or Mercedes. So, yeah, I think this checks out, to be honest. And it's not necessarily the most. I mean, Aston Martin is a legacy name, but it's not as exciting as a Ferrari or a Williams from a F1 kind of diehard standpoint. But it checks out. Right. Okay. Cool. So that is the first bit of news. Thank you, Robert Dornbos, for the insight. Next, sprints, and more of them, according to Stefano Domenicali. Now he's been speaking to this little article from Autosport, talking about reverse grids and also more of them. Let me find the quote. There we go. I think we are not in a position to say that we're going to be like MotoGP, for example, with a full race calendar situation of sprints, but there is margin to grow, maybe for 1/3 of the calendar. That could be a possibility. So, Stefano wants more sprints. And look, you may be disappointed. You should not be surprised. Sprints commercially just work. They just deliver more bank commercially, right? They deliver more value when you've got a ticket. having been to a sprint weekend, I went to Austria last year. You're seeing, qualifying on a Friday. You're seeing competitive running on the Friday, Saturday, Sunday. I think it's good for people who are there for the experience of those who buy tickets. Now, of course, those who buy tickets account for 0.5% of everyone watching. The overwhelming majority of people are watching on their screen at home. But I think that is, there are pros to sprints, okay? And that's, I think, the most clear and obvious version of a pro for a sprint is that it gives more value to those who are watching at home. Also, again, the tracks, because you're going to have more demand for a Friday, for example, because there's actually qualifying going on, you're probably going to sell a few more tickets. And, broadcasters, there's more eyeballs. Like, I know, and I'm sure plenty of you watching, unfortunately, on a sprint weekend, you will have to miss qualifying because you're at work on the Friday. And that sucks. But the overall numbers are higher still. I remember I saw, I saw there was a breakdown of the audience figures in the US. I think it was was Miami a sprint last year? Well, it was one of the races last year. And the uptick in Friday viewership was about, I want to say it was more than twice as much, I think, on a Friday watching because it was qualifying. And obviously that means more, the TV sponsors are getting more viewers, like eyeballs, blah, 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 right? From a commercial, there's no doubt, commercially, it works. But does it work for the sport, for the fans? Now, of course, I find sprints annoying primarily because it messes with all the stats. And when I'm trying to do videos, right, this is a very individual problem, okay? Whenever I'm having to account sprints, I'm like, for God's sake, I've got to work out the sprint points if I'm doing IndyCar point system with sprints, for example. A bit of a pain in the arse for me, to be honest. But broadly speaking, I think there is definitely an argument it takes away from what makes the Sunday special. I do think, though, to go to all of the effort to fly wherever you are in the world, right? Go all the way to Australia, right? Say we go to Rwanda. That was a bit of news. That apparently Rwanda's having talks for an F1 race to bring F1 to Africa, not at Kyalami. We'll see about that. You go to all that effort, and then everyone gets there. It's not getting there Wednesday. You start driver presses Thursday. Friday is just practice, which, is kind of okay to watch. It's very hard to pull any insights as a fan. Do I enjoy practice? Not really. I watch it to try and glean what I can, what understanding I can, but I don't particularly enjoy practice. And then Saturday is more practice, and then a qualifying session, and then Sunday's a race. It's like, can we actually get more racing and more spectacle, more sport out of that? Fundamentally, I get that. I get that. I do understand that. Now, are sprints the right way of going about it? I don't know. Where they've played around with the format a bit, I do think the format they have for the sprint right now is the best it has been. I do still think it can be better. And in this article, where Stefano's talked about it, he's talked about reverse grids for sprints, nothing fake about it. And again, look, when we talk about artificial changes, this whole sport is artificial. Formula One did not exist in nature, okay? It wasn't Adam and Eve and Adrian Newey. It's not how it works, okay? And you can, whether it's I don't know, is DRS a gimmick? Many people would say yes, and perhaps it is. Is you come up with anything you can look at, or is it a gimmick? Is it a gimmick? Like, at the end of the day, that isn't, I don't think, if you're going to write off sprints, I think there needs to be more reason than just, oh, it's a gimmick, because, well, you could say it about pretty much anything. Now, reverse grids, that's not me saying I agree with reverse grids, by the way. I think what they need to do to make the sprints feel more special and more independent and more unique and more separated, because even still now, because the quali format for the sprint is the same as the quali format for the non-sprint, and the sprint itself is just a 1/3 distance race, basically. And Taco playing, you're right. And I'm going to keep beating this drum. Make the sprint quali one shot, just to make it feel different. So it's not Q1, Q2, Q3. It's just a different qualifying system, right? Make it one shot. Make it a bit more interesting. I would probably be more inclined towards that than I would be a reverse grid, maybe. I would like to see them try out one shot just for the sprint qualies. That's what I'd like to see. Give it a go. Give it a go. Yeah, sure, people get caught at it. People say it's not fair. Normal quali's not fair either. You get traffic, you get teammates slipstreaming each other, you get like people crashing, and then you've got to get out of your lap. You get rid of all of that with one shot. Sure, then you introduce some other problems potentially, like it rains and catches people out, but then that also happens in normal quali anyway, to an extent. So I think they need to do more to make these sprints feel more independent and unique from the race, because right now it's still kind of blending all into one. So I give it a go. Bryce, just a one-lap shootout. V8 Supercars, top 10 shootout format is awesome. Well, perhaps that's the way. I think they just need to do something different to make it feel more unique, and I think that will allow people to be more accepting of what it is. Reverse grids is, it's interesting that it works so well in junior formulas, but those are spec series, and ultimately the cream rises to the top, and should do more so in F1, because in F1 there are cars with inherent car advantage over others. So even if Max Verstappen is starting, puts it on pole, but then does the reverse grid sprint, starting in P8, then, he's still gonna make his way past, if maybe Albon or Stroll, sneaks in for the reverse grid pole or whatever. Like, he's still going to make his way past in a 1/3 race, most likely. But yeah, that's how I'd like to see it change. And, Stefano says in this that that there is a margin to grow maybe for 1/3 of the calendar. And I don't think it will stop there. I think it will just gradually tick up. Okay, we've got 24 races, which 24 divides very nicely into 4 and to 3. So it's a quarter of the calendar so far is sprints. It will be 8, I think, next year for sure. Not next year, sorry. In 2026, I think it will be 8 sprints. Next year, it's already confirmed the 6 that we're having. No Austria, which is sad because I quite like the Austria sprint, but I'm probably biased because I've been. So, yeah, and I just think that it will then become 10 and then 12, and then it will get to the point where it is half, I think, for sure. But I guess this is the time where it is a minority, it's 6 out of 24, to try these things out and work out a system, because I still don't think I think it's better in its current form than it was, last year, but it's still not there yet. It's still not there. Monaco sprint is right in deal. Yeah, I mean, that's always going to be a hard sell, isn't it? That's always going to be a hard sell. Oh dear. But yeah, that's what Domenicali thinks. He's prepared to introduce change into the sport, and time will tell whether it's the right change or not. We're going to do a little poll as well. So, what? Oh, okay. Would one shot improve the sprint? Would one shot quality improve the sprint? Yes, neutral, or no. There you go. Let me know what you think. Do you think my idea of one shot for the sprint quali to make it feel more unique, more different, and then it potentially, mixes things up for the sprint order a bit more, because you've got less in Q1, Q2, Q3. You can set multiple laps. So even if you cock up once, you can go again. With one shot, it's all or nothing for everyone. And I'm saying the full grid one shots, by the way. And then perhaps the order that everyone goes out is set by, your finishing order in practice. So that sprint practice, because you've only got one session, you've only got an FP1, you've not got an FP2 or 3. Obviously, yeah, you have to get as much data as you can, but you also want to make sure that you're finishing on a soft to get high up to then get a preferential starting order with track evolution for one shot. And then maybe reverse grids. Maybe I feel like one shot could be enough, but I would certainly be open to seeing both tried out. 60% of you think yes, 23% neutral, 16% no. Good. Stefano, you better be listening, mate. Good. The people have spoken. I have influenced you. I'm in your head. I'm in there right there now. Influencing. Oh, love it. Lovely jubbly. Right, cool. Okay. 38 minutes in. Anything else we want to talk about? There's no particular other strong news sources, but of course I am live on YouTube. And don't forget to like this stream, by the way, if you're live on YouTube. And make sure you rate 5-star Apple Podcasts, Spotify, wherever you're listening as well. Make sure you get all that done, right? But if you are here live on YouTube, as 684 of you are, what else? You sold me, I admit it. Yard Animal Seek. Influential. Okay. Oh, dear. Mazepin to Alpine. Yeah, I did see the... so, obviously, where Ollie Oaks is ex-High-Tech and has joined Alpine. And High-Tech are, or were, I don't actually know, bankrolled by Dimitri Mazepin at one point. I don't know if they still are. I'm not sure the case, because obviously High-Tech is UK-based. And obviously a lot of UK companies with Russian oligarch money, for example, Chelsea Football Club, I don't know how that works with Dimitri Mazepin and High-Tech. But there was talk of that. I mean, I don't even think Mazepin's really doing much racing anymore, is he? I don't think so. I'm not really seeing anything from him, to be honest. I don't think that's going to happen. I really, really don't think that's going to happen. Potential Alpine sale. Yes, Shivam. Well, look. So, obviously, the moves that Alpine have been making as of late, Briatore in, dropping their own engine development. It does seem like Alpine are at least preparing the team so that they could sell it quite easily, because it kind of works independently of Vieri and it's kind of its own isolated thing in Enstone. It at least gives Alpine an easier exit route than if they were still providing their own engines from 26 onwards. And this week's video is going to be basically talking about the potential suitors if Alpine were to sell that team, because I'm quite interested. Like, I like talking about the business of this sport when I can, just because I think it's an interesting angle, and I think there's a lot of brands out there, whether they're automotive brands, whether they're, you know, a brand like Red Bull, like a more like culturally relevant brands, could be a watch brand, could be whatever, that could benefit from purchasing a team and owning a team in this sport. And obviously, there's been a lot of talk around Andretti, understandably, but I think there's a lot of brands out there that, and I'm interested. I put a community post. So if you do want to give some insight, maybe there's a brand, a really niche brand, or maybe a big brand that you're like, even if they've never been even slightly referenced relative to F1, a brand that you think there is merit in them getting into F1 for their business, you know, because it's all marketing at the end of the day. That's the only reason Red Bull, Mercedes, it's to sell their product outside. That's why they do it. Even Gene Haas, he wants to sell CNC machines. So I'd be interested to hear if you've got any interesting brands, especially ones that haven't really been talked about, you know, then chuck it in the old community post. Prime, they wish. But yeah, Life F1, bring them back. Piastri's broken rib. Yes, apparently he had a broken rib. I'll be honest, when he posted that picture of the ultrasound, I thought he was announcing that him and his partner were having a baby. That was my immediate. I was like, oh my God, Oscar's going to be a dad. I was like, oh no, it's broken rib. That was my immediate reaction. But yeah, he broke a rib at some point, and yeah, I mean, flex, I guess, because he's been cooking. He's been cooking as of late, so fair play, Oscar. Think what you can do without a broken rib. But then again, you know, when Lance broke his hand, he pulled out an unreal performance in Bahrain. So, you know, maybe he did cook anyway. Alonso world champion. Is that really news, Vagar? Because, you know, it was 2005-06. It's a fair while ago. But again, maybe with Adrian coming into Aston Martin, potentially. Not confirmed, of course, potentially. But according to Robert Dornbos, it's done. That might make Alonso's future plans to stick around a little bit more realistic, maybe. A few of you mentioned Porsche. I'm not sure, like, is Porsche... Is there any news around F1 a closed chapter for Porsche after failed Red Bull bid? All right, there's a little article from Autosport here that I'll just bring up on screen. Here we go. F1 a closed chapter for Porsche after failed Red Bull bid. Talks broke down. Now a closed chapter. Boss Thomas Ludenbach is revealed. Porsche has no plans for a comeback more than 30 years on from its last engagement as an engine supplier with Footwork in 91. Yeah, it feels like that. Here we go. It is off the table right now. F1 is not a task for us, and we are not spending energy on that. We are only focused on what we do right now. And if you look at it, we have many different activities. And obviously, yeah, again, like they've got in this picture, you know, they've got their Porsche Penske entry. Formula One doesn't make a business case for everyone, does it? It doesn't always make sense. But maybe I'll bring this up in my video. Just mention Porsche and how, you know, seeing what they're achieving. Their brand is very... Porsche have a fantastic brand already. So you can argue that there isn't that value to Porsche to jump into Formula One like there would be other brands that maybe don't have the... Well, in fact, actually, Cadillac, as you can see in the picture here, right? Cadillac is not a brand with the same level of history in motorsport and prestige. It's not as prestigious. as Porsche, Cadillac. Come on. Even the most ardent Cadillac fan, you must agree with that, right? Porsche. So Cadillac would benefit, I think, more than Porsche would from the brand equity that Formula One can give. I think Mercedes used to be quite a old man brand, and I think it's not anymore, thanks in part to the sport. And yeah, if Porsche doesn't win, it'd be very damaging. They're doing their thing in WEC, and they've got probably the biggest GT program there is with all the Porsche Carrera Cups and GT challenges that they have. So I don't think Porsche need F1. So I'll probably rank them. I'm going to do like a tier list of all these brands that have been suggested, of like whether they would, have benefit from buying a team based in the UK as well. I'm just like, don't know about that. Don't know about that one. Peugeot would be cool. Peugeot could be cool for sure. But yeah. All right. Well, that's 47 minutes in. I think we're good. Again, check out my video later this week where we'll talk all about. I've seen a few more suggestions that I might chuck in as well to this one. But yeah, thank you all for watching wherever you are in the world. I do very much appreciate it. Thank you for supporting what I do. And make sure you check out my video later this week on who should buy Alpine, because it does feel like they're preparing for a potential exit, or at least keeping that door open. Thank you, Grace, David, Max, Tuna, Taco Plane, Average Joe, Or, Milo, Alex, Sammy, Rangi, Bring, Taco. Yeah, Minton's probably like, it's so hot. Yesterday it was 37 degrees in England. I was at Brands Hatch yesterday, actually. It's 37 degrees. It's just awful. And even by 6:30 in the evening, it was 32 degrees where I am. 30. And it wasn't even sunny. It was just muggy and horrible and sweaty and nasty. So that's why I wanted to do the stream bright and early this morning. Anyway, thank you all for watching, as ever. And like, comment, do all that good stuff. Interact with my things. And ciao, adios. There we go. I'm done. Bye-bye.